Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I am Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicated to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want. And so I'd love to welcome today Kelly Tolliday. She has been an incredible friend and colleague in the space of health, wellness, motherhood, pregnancy, postnatal care, and also a retreat business that she has that just has me drooling every time I see the photos and the videos about what she's doing. I've had the honor of teaching in one of your retreats, really showing women how Ayurveda can support them. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. So I'd love for you to start by sharing a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got to where you are. Because when we met at a wellness studio so many years ago, you were teaching yoga. I know you're a registered yoga and meditation teacher, and you do so much in this space. So can you share a little of that journey?
Yeah. So I guess with my yoga journey, it started when I was about 15. I was a competitive swimmer, and I was swimming anywhere between 3 to 5 hours a day for about 8 years. And over time, the mechanics of your body just start to break down if you're doing the same motion over and over and over again. And eventually, I was starting to get tendinitis, and my coach, my trainer, was like, "You are seeing the chiropractor, you're seeing the massage therapist, you're seeing the PT, nothing's working." I heard about this thing called yoga, and I was like, all right, fine. There was a studio near my house, and it was Bikram, as all yoga started out at in the West here. Yeah. And I loved it. I went for my first class, and I think the challenge for a 15-year-old athlete, the heat and the grit that it required, and it really required me to be so present, focusing on my body, because I was doing all these moves that I never knew before. It was really challenging. But really, it was that first Shavasana where I laid down, and I'd grown up Catholic my whole life. I went to Catholic school from when I was in pre-K all the way to 12th grade. And that was the first time in that Shavasana that I could truly say I had, I guess you could say, like a spiritual moment or a conversation with God or some sort of aha moment. And I remember hearing a really strong voice saying, "This is what you're going to do." Wow. And I was like, no, I'm not. Like, my parents wouldn't let me do that. I'm not allowed to do that. I won't make any money doing all the things.
Right.
But it was a really strong voice. And I knew I'm just going to keep practicing. And at some stage, like, this will come into fruition. Yeah. And I went to college, did all the things in college, but I was still practicing. It was still more of like a physical practice than it was spiritual or moving into more of those subtle aspects of the practice. And yeah, I kept practicing. And then I met in 2013, the fall semester of my senior year of college. I met my husband. I was in Ireland. Okay. And I was there for a wedding, and he was there traveling. He's Australian. And we just met in a bar in Dublin. And again, I heard that voice, like, this is him. And I felt like I might have heard that voice a couple more times before I met him. Yeah. But this was really strong again. It was like that voice that kept cultivating through my practice of knowing what my inner voice sounded like. Sure. And I was like, this is it. Like it was like one of those love at first sight moments. But I was also 21, so you never really know. But we met, and my whole entire life changed from that moment on, and we only knew each other for 2 days. He kept traveling on to Switzerland. I went back home. Yeah. 6 months later, I moved to Australia to live with him.
Wow,
and
that's
that was
a
really
huge shift.
Yeah, and I really think, like, through the practice of cultivating my practice over time, still it was mainly physical, I just got to know that inner voice a little bit more. Sure. And Sydney was our home base for a while. After about a year, we moved to Asia and traveled around Asia for a year. And that was really when my practice took it to the next level, where I could see the spirituality within the practice, where I could see Buddhism in practice. I could see, Balinese spirituality in practice. I could see Hinduism in practice. And that was what really opened up my eyes to, whoa, this is more than just headstands. This is more than just doing some fancy pose in a classroom with everyone in Lycra. Like this practice can be taken with you through your life.
True.
And that's what changed everything for me. I moved back to Sydney, found my home studio, did my teacher training, found my lifelong teacher. Nice. And that's really how my yoga journey has continued to be since. So
amazing. So you did YTT in Australia?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
In Sydney. Yes.
And then what led you back here and moving into when did you choose to kind of move into the motherhood journey and bring a yoga practice into what you do? Yeah.
So every time, my husband and I were like, where are we going to put down our roots? And I always knew that once I had kids, I would want to be close to my family. But after 5 years of living in Sydney, I was like, this place is pretty good. Yeah. I don't know. They've got it pretty good here. Yeah. But he was really the one that was like, I want a fresh start. You got a fresh start after college. It's time for us to move back to Florida. So we started the green card process. And during that time, waiting for his green card, we moved around Asia again for a little while. Nice. And once he got his green card, we moved back to the United States in July 2019. Oh, wow. And by November 2019, we were pregnant with our first child. Wow. So what really got me through that pregnancy, because it was really difficult for me, was really relying on my breathwork practice, really relying on meditation. And luckily, just a month before I had gotten pregnant, I did a full week immersion training in women's wellness yoga therapy. Nice. So it really helped me take exactly what I learned in that program, in that training, apply it to my own life so then I could help other women along the way. Sure. And it started off with a prenatal focus because that was my personal experience. Totally. And then after my daughter was born, she was a pandemic baby. So not a lot of support, not a lot of, physical support groups going on out there, not a lot of play dates, not a lot of even knowing if anyone else felt the same way that I did. It was a very isolating experience. I had such a hard time. Sure. Such a hard time with postpartum. I think the identity shift was the the hardest part for me was just realizing, wait, can I still do my business? Can I still travel? How is this going to look? Did my life just end? Did I just make the worst decision ever? I was going through the whole loop of it. On top of that, you're sleep deprived, your baby's screaming at you. You have no idea what you're doing. Totally. And it was just like all the culmination of all of that stress, just my body was like, that's it. We're out of here. We're going offline. And I just felt a really deep depression, no connection to my body. And it wasn't until I finally kind of picked my head up a little bit kind of after that fourth trimester, and I could kind of take a little bit of a breath. Yeah. And I looked around and I was like, wait, I have all these people that are here to support me. And luckily, because of the work that I've done prior, I knew of things like pelvic floor physical therapy and mental mental health counselors and yoga therapists that work specifically in that. I knew about Reiki. And because of my own experience working in this field for so long, once I was able to kind of see clearly, I was able to get the support that I needed. And that was what really drove me home on, okay, really women's wellness and specifically the pre and postnatal period is something that I think just needs so much more support. Sure. There's a lot of pregnancy support and there's really not that much postnatal support. It is out there, but it's not as mainstream. So people don't know, women don't know the support that's out there for them. So I'm really here to be a guide within the yoga, breathwork, meditation mindset space, but then also being a connector for other practitioners like yourself and like a prenatal chiropractor or a mental health counselor, and just being able to refer my clients out to different practitioners that can help. Awesome. There's so much there to unpack. So you have one child? I have two. You have two children. Yes. Yeah. And we must have met in 2019 then. Yes. Because you moved here in 2019. Yes. And then the world closed down and the studio where we met closed down and everything just shut down. I had my kids in, it's so hard to remember, 10, 7, 10, that's one kid. So 2010 and then 2013. So I was 30 and 33, but outside of pandemic. So I can't even fathom what it would mean to have a kiddo, a baby in the hospital. No one can be there. Like when all of my sister-in-laws and I had our children here in Boca, there were like 10 people in the room. It was a party and 10 more people in the waiting room. And
there was so much community around it.
Right.
And then you get home and everyone comes and holds the baby and you have all these visitors. And it's such a horribly confusing time because you have no idea what's happening. You have no idea how your body's going to come back. All those different things that it helps to have the distraction at least of people around you as you're trying to process what's going on.
Totally.
So was it very different to have your first and your second?
Yeah, so my second was still no visitors allowed in the hospital. Okay. It was way less crazy with the mask. Like you could wear a mask, you could not wear a mask. It was a little bit of leniency, yes, yeah. But still no visitors. And I think having a baby during COVID changed your perspective of what is quote unquote safe, I guess. So sure. In 2020, we were so afraid of visitors, even loved ones coming over. Like they had to wear masks, they had to triple wash their hands. They couldn't hold the baby if they were even remotely sniffly. Like It just changed your perspective of how fragile the babies were.
Right.
And so the second time around, we were a lot less, I guess, paranoid about everything, but we still kind of put the perspective of, you know what, let's just wear a mask. Like, why not? And just make sure you wash your hands. And we were a lot more lenient, but still there's this level of anxiety, I guess, not just about COVID, but about everything else that could be potentially even more serious than COVID that we wouldn't have thought about pre-pandemic.
Sure. I wonder what that's going to do for the gut microbiome.
Yes. I think about that a lot.
This entire generation,
yes.
You know, it's tough because my husband has a completely opposite perspective. He's like, they should roll in the dirt.
Yes, totally.
Someone has a cold, let's go hug them. And I'm like, no, I don't have time for colds. I can't work. And today the kids were sniffly and I was like, no. I have to go out of town tomorrow. We have to lock this down. Yeah. I'm putting turmeric in your food, my curcumin, I'm putting probiotics. You watch me. I will fight this one off. Colloidal silver. We'll be done with this one in 5 seconds.
Totally.
Because the inconvenience factor. But truly, we do have to let them build immunity, you know?
Yeah, no, I feel
Interesting.
I feel that. It's
juxtaposition.
I'm the same way. I'm very much like, so my daughter, she's a straight up Virgo, like everything needs to be clean and orderly and she doesn't like dirt on her hands. And I'm like, oh, get out there. Like get the dirt on your hands. Yeah. Like roll around in it. But at the time it was such an unknown that we were just trying to keep everyone and all the ones that we love safe.
Yeah, of course.
Even still, she leaves daycare and there's like a little hand sanitizer. And she's like, I want to do it. I want to put the hand sanitizer on my hands. I'm like, no,
put
it down.
Don't touch it. Yeah. No, I tell my kids don't touch. So
it's going to be, it's just like, we just don't know like what the effects are going to be. And all we can do is our best. Totally. All we could do at that time was the best with the information that we were given. And we were all perceiving that information differently.
Totally.
And that's kind of just a lesson for life is just like respect other people's opinions on things because we're all coming at it from different backgrounds and experiences and family. So
completely. Yeah. You know, during that time, I remember the world was shutting down and my first gut reaction was, this is my fortress. I will protect these children. Mm-hmm. And it was just so interesting to have, from me, normally my husband's the protector and he controls a lot of things. He's like, I've got this. And literally this voice rose out of me like, you will handle this now. I ordered bikes. I ordered scooters. All of a sudden I ordered puzzles. I was like, you better believe I will be putting a bubble around this home and they will not realize that there's a pandemic. But of course children listen. So they could hear me in my room talking to my sister-in-law, like, we're going to die. What are we doing here? You know?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing to think of that trauma that happened to everyone. And then very soon I realized, just because my family was so blasé, because they're all in medicine, they were like, we operate on COVID patients. We take care of, we go in their rooms. I was like, well, if we're committed, then let's enjoy this time. So then we flipped it and did like farmers markets and had our one COVID friend and, you know, like made it fun.
Yeah.
Because what else can you do? So it was an interesting time. So going back to the topic of motherhood, because to me, it's funny, pregnancy and motherhood, I think is one of the biggest times, the biggest shifts that we go through as women. And I am a born Pitta. I'm a Pitta through and through. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm a fire sign. So I always have like so much stuff in motion. And then I'm an introvert. So I have to go like lock up, hide, cool down, and have quiet to recuperate from all the things that I want to do. And I remember having my kid, and I always explain it like this. I feel like someone took me, and I was Tom Brady, and I was so epic in my life and successful and on my path. And they just took me and dropped me off in the Siberian desert with no credit card, no money, and no phone. And were like, go find yourself and find your way home.
Totally. Yeah.
And it was so traumatizing. Yeah. I was like, what on earth? And like you're mentioning, I had a doula. I had an amazing place I went to. I went to prenatal classes. I had a huge family around me. Granted, their mindset on health and wellness is the opposite of mine, but they were around me and there to support. And still, it took a year. I tried to breastfeed for as long as I could. I think I got to 9 months with my first kiddo. And even by a year, it finally, like, the clouds clear. So can you share, I know you created the experiences on the deck at your home. That's kind of what we met and talked about during COVID and participating there. Can you share what you've seen in terms of what you believe women need to think about even before they have kids, so they have their dream team in place? What resources are so effective for them? And then what are maybe some stories of some like pivotal turns that you've been able to help create in women because they got the community or the support or the resources or tools? Yeah. Because postpartum depression, from what I've seen multiple brilliant, awesome, powerhouse women around me. One is an MD, one is just a brilliant businesswoman. Both of them had to go home to mom and live with mom for 2 to 3 months post-baby just to get themselves back and be safe with their own kids. Yeah. It's a powerful topic.
Yeah, it's one of the, if not the biggest, transitional times in your life, but also it can be a source of such big power for you. So with my first, I had what I perceived to be a traumatic birth. And I think that had such an impact on my overall postpartum experience. And I had the doula. I was with a midwife. I was at a birth center. I could do whatever I wanted. I did all the things, quote unquote, right.
Yes.
And I think that is what sets a lot of women up for failures, trying to do all the things right. I wanted to breastfeed, not necessarily because I wanted to, but because that's what a good alternative wellness practitioner does.
Absolutely.
And it didn't work. It just didn't physically work. And I was literally killing myself to make it work.
Yeah.
And I think what the pivotal point for me was just allowing myself to drop that guilt and to say, this is not going to work for me. It's definitely not working for the baby because she's picking up on all of my stress.
Totally.
And I just had to learn through the help of mentors and guides and teachers and support and elder women, just saying there's one of the biggest profound thing that one of my mom's friends told me was, I see you're trying really hard to be the perfect mom, and I just want to tell you there's no such thing. Absolutely. And it just helped me drop the bundle. It helped me just realize it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not have everything perfect. The only thing your baby needs from you is love and support and their biological needs met at this stage. Just do the best that you can. And I can't give my full love and my full support if I'm feeling completely drained, if I'm feeling like my body's falling apart, which in turn makes you feel like your mind's falling apart and your relationship's falling apart. So I created a ebook called The Peaceful Postpartum Plan. Awesome. And it's a really short, simple ebook. It also includes different breathwork practices, as well as motherhood mantras. And it's talking all about that. That first chapter is the bulk of it, and it's about support and really building not just your prenatal team, but most importantly, your postnatal team. We got all of the baby list registries. Yeah. All your nursery is completely to a T perfect with the color schemes and all the machines and the equipment. Yeah. And you know exactly the outfit you're going to have for your baby when he or she's born.
Sure.
But you've never even thought about, okay, what's our sleep plan? Like, how are you and I, if you have a partner, going to tackle sleep? We don't even know how are we going to handle meals? Do we have a meal plan or a meal train or someone bringing us meals? How are we going to handle if I do have a mood disorder or some sort of condition or anxiety or depression? All of these things we can line ourselves up for ahead of time.
Sure.
We can plan, we can research mental health counselors so that you don't have to be researching at 4 a.m. being like, oh, this review is bad and that review is bad. Like, you can find your mental health counselor beforehand. So all you have to do is have them on speed dial if something happens.
Totally.
You can research pelvic floor physical therapists. You can have your even postpartum doula is an amazing resource, a massage therapist. But most importantly, what I've seen be the most profound tool for healing for women is just having a safe space to talk openly, vulnerably, truthfully, because a lot of times you hear oh yeah, everything's fine. Baby's sleeping well. Everything's good. You know, I'm a little tired, but everything's fine. And there you go. And you move along.
True.
Meanwhile, that woman just got into her car and she's bawling her eyes out for the last 10 minutes because her baby isn't stop sleeping or she doesn't know what she's doing.
Sure.
But she doesn't feel like she can talk. So the biggest points of transformation that I've seen in my clients, in my community, just amongst friends.
Yeah.
Is having space to say, yeah, you know what? Like, this kind of sucks. Like,
totally.
This is really, really hard. And I'm having a really hard time with this. And I've had friends just come to, and clients as well, come to complete revelations or complete just, big sigh of relief just to say the thing, this is really hard.
Yeah.
I don't have to have it all together. I can be open. And I think the more that women feel safe in doing so, the more we can collectively pick each other back up because we're all looking at each other like, oh, wait, you think this is hard too? I don't have to, pull it all together all the time. Okay, cool. Let's lift each other up and be there for each other. I'll text you at 2 a.m. and say, you feeding the baby? I'm rocking too. And you're just able to feel a little more supported in that way.
Absolutely. My sister-in-law is my best friend, and we always say that we absolutely could not have gotten through motherhood without each other. Because anytime one of us was pregnant, the other one would say, all right, we will have cheese and crackers and charcuterie. There was a cheese place in Meisner that we'd go to every day. But we would spend that time together. We would call each other. When I had problems, she'd come over and be like, this is how you help with breastfeeding and all those things, because she had her first one right before mine. And so it is such a powerful time where if we don't have community, and also even if you have someone close to you, I think it helps to still have groups you go to.
Yes.
I remember there was back then the Red Tent, and they would have tea time.
Yes.
And I'd go to tea
love
there.
It there. Yes.
And now at Yoga Journey, there's a yoga teacher who's creating like postnatal or prenatal yoga with tea time as well. And I remember going and I was like, my husband wants to leave for China and my child's 4 months old and I'm breastfeeding. This is going to derail everything. And how do I pump on a plane? I don't understand. And they just listened to me go nuts. And then they were like, look, it's going to be fine. Here's how you do it. You're going to figure it out. You'll be fine. And the baby will adjust. And there's this thing called formula and it'll all be okay. And as the mom that I was, we laugh because my sister-in-law and I call it the Pinterest perfect mom. If you go on Pinterest, the nurseries are stunning. Mm-hmm. The homes are stunning. The moms look amazing, even in their swimsuits next to their babies. They create this false reality that completely does not exist. Mm-hmm. And I can achieve those moments for a photograph. I know how to photograph life in a certain way. But I'm kind of sick of that false reality pushing us to live to an ideal that doesn't exist, and then you're not happy with your own reality. So that's where community was so helpful, because we were all like, wow, that is a load of crap. And this is reality. And we're trying our best. Like I had a lot of guilt that I didn't cook fresh food for my kids, but I tried. And every time I mixed apple and cinnamon and all these weird ideas, they hated it and they spit it out. And eventually I was like, how many organic foods would you like me to cook and blend? Whatever. Yeah. No, I'm going to buy this organic. Yeah. I was like, this is a huge formula for failure. And I hate failing. And I don't like any of this. Yeah. And I can't get this kid to listen. So we're just going to buy 50 organic jars of food. And whatever they want to eat, they can eat. Yeah. And then I'm not stressing about the cooking and the preparing. But I had a lot of guilt because I was like, well, how come I'm not that mom? How could that possibly be when I know better? But if we can't be happy and at peace with our kids, what's the point?
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. It's what you just said is I thought I was going to be this certain type of mom. Yeah. And that is one of the biggest things I see with my clients is this cognitive dissonance between I thought I was going to have this kind of birth.
Yeah.
And then it went completely sideways and I had an unplanned C-section, or I had, my baby had to go into NICU, and it's these expectations that we think are going to line up because we've done everything right. We've done the planning. Sure. And it sounds like you and I have really similar personalities and making sure all of our ducks are in a row. And the same thing goes with motherhood. I thought I would be the really fun, creative, homeschooling mom. And now I'm like, no, you're going to daycare. I'm like a 3-day weekend, like that Tuesday, you're the first one in line.
Exactly.
And it's like this cognitive dissonance of I thought it was going to be one way and it turned out completely different. And why can't I be that person that I so wanted to be? And you really just have to dig deep into, well, what are actually your core values? And does that ideal, quote unquote, mom, that ideal personality or that ideal family situation, what does that actually mean? And what does that align with my values? Because maybe it doesn't align at all. It's just because it looked really cool on Instagram, or you're hearing these just like popcorn information. I call it popcorn information on Instagram because you're just only seeing little snippets of education that are getting thrown at you, and you think you understand the whole story, but you're not quite integrating.
Sure.
So you're seeing these little reels that are really inspiring, and life is amazing, and if you have this kind of birth, and life will be amazing if you're this kind of mom.
Right.
But you're not seeing the full story. And you just really have to come to terms with, like, what are my core values as a mom? What's the legacy that I want to create? And can I drop this expectation of being a certain way so that I can step into being my fullest self? And those two things might not look the same. They might overlap, but they might not look exactly the same. And it goes back to dropping the guilt. It goes back to all of these core lessons that it takes a lifetime for us moms to learn. As soon as we think we got a handle on something, our kids move into the next stage of childhood, and it throws you for another loop. And it's about letting go of that expectation, dropping the guilt, and really just stepping into your truest and most authentic version of yourself as a mom. Because when you're trying to live up to somebody else's ideals, you're always going to fall short in some capacity. So just keep on, like, put the blinders on the best that you can. I think it's a lot easier to put the blinders on with your second child.
Yeah, it is.
You mentioned the perfect nursery, and I was like, yeah, my first kid had a beautiful nursery. Yeah. The second kid was in just a pack and play, and there was a guest bed in there, and there was no color scheme. Yep. And she's a really, really happy baby. I got to tell you. So
I was like, you get the first crib, but in my bedroom. Let's just not.
Yeah,
let's call it what it is.
And I think also that that concept of not stressing so much about absolutely everything and trusting that everything is actually going to be okay because you have the historical evidence through your first child.
Sure.
Everything ended up being okay for the most part. So there's I think the baby can really pick up on that stress from you.
Sure.
And just anecdotally from what I hear from my own community, my own clients, is that you are a little bit less stressed and anxious with the second because you know that you can get through this, that you can make those decisions, and you're not, being anxious about every little idea and thought that you have. So
totally. And I think we can historically see second children are very different than first children.
Yes.
All of them.
Collectively, I'm a first. Yes.
Yeah. I'm a first child. So I'm particular, and I'm organized, and I'm perfectionist, and I'm demanding of myself. I expect things to be a certain way. I always seek the best and go for the best and want the best. Yeah. And my sister, she just, she has such a different personality. We call it must in India, like happy and free. And yet she's insanely successful. She has everything she wants. And I just look at her like, why does everyone not have to do all the work to get what they want? How come you can just do this in such a carefree way? She hustles, but in a different way. And then I look at my kids and same thing. Anya is like particular and organized and everything. She wants to control everything. And my son is just all over the place, but happy and healthy and vibrant and joyful.
Exactly.
So it's just...
And that's the ultimate success, right? Yeah. I always think about when they talk about kids going into kindergarten, we're kind of at that stage thinking about kindergartens and they always talk about kindergarten readiness and they're going to fall behind and so and so and so. And you're like, but behind what?
Yeah.
Behind who?
It's true.
The ultimate level of success for me, for my kids, is, as you said, happy, healthy, free,
confident,
courageous, kind, curious. Yeah. And so I think the same level that we don't want our kids to feel that pressure, we have to take that pressure off of ourselves too as moms. And the more that we do that, our kids see us as those models. Sure. And they see us slow down and they see us putting ourselves first. And in turn, they start building that toolkit for themselves.
Sure. That's a harder thing to do.
Yes, always.
I'm looking at you like, slow down. What? Slow down as I speed up.
Yeah.
But you know what I do? I teach seasons. I teach seasonality to life. Really? I teach so much about self-care because I need it to not burn out. I put a rhythm in place in pandemic times where I made it part of our rhythm to go out in nature. And so yesterday, all evening, I'm looking out the windows like, hey, why is it raining? We need to go out in nature somehow. And so they know that that's just baked into our lives now. Yeah. And it's their way to decompress. It's my way to decompress. So I just think it's so important to do that.
Yeah. And what you just mentioned, like baking in certain wellness components into your day-to-day life. I think as we mentioned before, we started recording was, we try to like silo everything. Like, okay, my exercise is at the gym. I have to go to the gym, or I have to go to this class, or I have to do this so that I get exercise. And my work is here, and my motherhood is here. And truly, especially the way that our modern world is going is, and as we've seen with the pandemic, is life is hybrid. Like we have to find a way to bake wellness into our day-to-day life. So that if we don't get that 20-minute meditation in the morning, which is really, really hard as a mom, it doesn't mean that the whole rest of the day is a wash. You can practice mindfulness when you're at the dishes, like feel the cool water, the warm water against your hands. You can smell the soap. You can take 5 deep breaths. There's ways to build in your mindfulness, build in wellness, build in ways to elevate your health as a mom without it having to be a completely separate part of your day. You don't have to block out 2 hours to do your exercise. You can go for a walk. When your kid wakes up early, go for a long walk and take that time to hear the birds in the morning and see the sun coming up. There's ways to build it in so that you're not having to be like, okay, on top of cooking and cleaning and caring for these children and working, if you're a working parent, I also have to fit in 30 minutes in the morning and an hour of exercise. Right. No, there's ways to make our lives hybrid so that it feels more in flow and that it feels like our life is about wellness rather than slotting in these different to-do lists here and there. I know you talk about that a lot with your tea time is me time. And I've taken that to like such a degree that I love those anchor points in your day for sure.
You know, it's interesting you say silo. I do that. I think of it as like morning, then drop the kids, gym, shower, get to work. That's where you work. Okay, you cut that day at the end with tea time. Okay, you have to transition. Now it's motherhood. And it's interesting because when you silo that way, you can have friction. A lot of times I'll end up at my business day and all I'm managing is the kids' schedules. Mm-hmm. Okay, I have to cancel this appointment, move this thing. Oh, she has an assembly? Yes, I'll fill out that form. And I'm like, this is so unfair that my business day is half for the children. And I'm like, well, you didn't get ahead on the weekend. So the punishment is your whole work week is like this. But it shouldn't cause that friction. Then I get home and I had like my TEDx coaching call with this lady who's helping me write my future TED Talk that I want to do. And that was cutting into dinner. And I'm like, wait, what? So you're right. We have a habit of siloing our lives and then allowing it to cause this friction.
Totally.
And instead, if we can just look at it as it's all one continuum and flow, and I've got to get X done, whatever that is. So that's where evening walks became a big deal because I am unable to dedicate the time in the morning to meditate. By the time I wake the kids up 3 times and then we get out the door late every day. No, I've never had a morning this year when we've been on time. So we are sprinting out that door 5 minutes late every day. There's usually not like a 5-minute slice anywhere. So I consider walking meditation that time. Totally. I'm like, you walk, you decompress, you connect with nature. Everything that I need to accomplish from an Ayurvedic self-care standpoint can happen walking in a park. The kids are getting to play, they're in nature, they're moving, which is so important to me. And then I get to achieve all those inner goals.
Yeah. And as you mentioned before with the seasons, is I think I talk to a lot of new moms, newborn moms as well. And they're like, I just want to get to my yoga class and I just want to do these things. And while I teach ways and strategies to be able to build this into your day and also ways and strategies to drop the guilt when you actually do go on your own. I talk to a lot of other clients as well that I went to yoga. I'm like, yes. And they're like, I cried the whole time. I felt so guilty. I'm like, then that's taking away the point of your self-care, right? So there's whole other strategies for how to drop that guilt. Yeah. But I speak to a lot of moms. They're like, I just want to be able to go on this retreat with you. I just want to go and do a mini workshop with you. I just want to go do all these things. But we have, my husband's grandparents coming into town to meet our child for the first time. And I go, look, you're in a season of life. Yeah. This is a season of life that you're in. And the more, again, going back to this acceptance and dropping guilt and just surrendering to what is, the more that we can be in the acceptance of this is the season that I'm in. I can slot in my wellness while I can. But right now, this is a season that I need to dedicate to being in and not trying to be elsewhere.
And be present.
And be present.
Yeah,
which is
hard.
Really hard. Yes.
It is hard. Even now, my kids are 12 and 9. Now I feel more present than ever. But I think it's because I'm so happy with my business. I'm so happy that it's getting to where it needs to be for me to feel right about what I created. I already felt that it was impactful, but I needed it to make sense as a business. So now that that's there and I feel wonderful about my body and my health, I feel so happy with everything I've created. Now I can look at my kids and say, wow, you deserve my absolute presence when I'm with you too. And before, it was hard. Before, there was all these conversations running in the background all the time. And so now when I look at them, I'm there with them, and it's a whole different experience. Yeah. And I wish I could have done that since the beginning, But it is what it is.
Exactly.
That's the experience we were all meant to have.
Drop the guilt of all that learning, because how amazing that at 9 and 12, you're so present with them. Sure. Most people don't get that at all with their parents ever, or it's way older when they're in adulthood and they're doing a lot of repair work. So it's like, True. You know what, those are the lessons that you had to learn at that time and that many moms are still learning.
Sure.
Just drop the guilt.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it's a powerful tool. If we're going to be guilty while we're doing something, what's the point? I say that with food. Yes. If I'm going to eat this thing, I'm going to enjoy the thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to poison the thing as I consume it. So if we're going to have guilt as we go to yoga, then our mind is actually on the guilt, not on the experience. And so what's the point? Like, why even go if we're going to wash ourselves in negativity?
Totally.
As opposed to the positive thing that we're signing up
100%,
for.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned retreats and getting away. Mm-hmm. And as you said it, I was like, wow, maybe that's why she offers the half-day retreat. Because any of us usually can escape for a half day. That's a very doable way to get that dose of immersion. And I remember one day a friend of mine shared, she was traveling, and she's an acupuncturist, actually. She was my fertility, pregnancy acupuncturist. Aww. Her name's Susan Schiff in Delray. And she said, I was traveling to Canada, Shivani, and I had this free time. And so I went and did yoga, a float tank, and something else. I can't remember what she said. And she said I was so blissed out after. I sat down and I could write a whole book. Like, everything was just coming to me. And I thought, that is the coolest idea I've ever heard. So one day I created that for myself. I worked out with my favorite trainer in my gym, went to yoga with Leslie, who I love. Then I went to a float tank and floated, which I had never done before. Then I did something else that day, maybe acupuncture. And I was so on cloud 9 after. And I've never given myself that gift again, but I do think about, like, what power would there be in just dropping into my parasympathetic nervous system, being so relaxed in my system, letting go of all responsibility, and what powerful creative messages would come to me, what insights, like you talked about your intuition in Shavasana. So can you share, a little bit about your retreat business that you have, I know in partnership, what you guys have created, what the intention was, and especially some of the stories, because I think sometimes we know what's good for us, but until we hear what happened to someone and how it happened, we don't quite embody what that could mean for ourselves.
Yeah, totally. It's like you need that social proof to be like, okay, it worked for that person.
Yeah.
Okay, so the postpartum, women's wellness, the coaching, the ebooks, the private yoga, all that's under my one business, Hello True Nature.
Awesome.
And then the retreat business is under Rising Nature Retreats. So my brand is Hello True Nature. My business partner's brand is the Gemini Rising. So we merge those together for Rising Nature Retreats.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, just as you said, I started, we met during one of our mini retreats. I started mini retreats during the pandemic because it was outside. None of the studios were open. The community this was in January 2021. So while the pandemic was still very much going on, people were really craving in-person community. So we thought, okay, if we're outside, we limit it to a really small amount of people.
Sure.
People can still practice. And at my home studio in Sydney, they had 2 beautiful studios on the second floor, and below was this amazing Whole Foods cafe where people would go and practice and breathe and meditate, and then go downstairs and have the most vulnerable, beautiful, open-hearted conversations. And I thought, this is what the practice is. It's taking what you've done on the mat and then integrating that into conversation with your friends who turn into lifelong people who you hold so near and dear to your heart. So I wanted to create that here. And I started by having people come to my backyard. I had a yoga deck built.
Nice.
Yeah. We had we would practice, and then afterwards we would have coffee and tea, and we'd have journal and group discussions. And that started with 2 people in January 2021. Nice. And we've officially moved from my backyard into a bigger outdoor Zen garden space in Wilton Manors. But that is now getting close to 25 to 30 people. It started off monthly, and now we do it quarterly. But like you said, it's an accessible way for people to get a small dose of what it's like to be on a retreat. They get that time to immerse themselves fully into themselves. They get to practice. Right. They meet local brands. There's group discussion where you meet other people in the community. And so we've expanded that from our half mini days, it's usually about 3 or 4 hours.
Sure.
We have full day spa retreats. Like you said, you get to do all the things you practice. You have a treatment, you go to the beach, you have a gourmet lunch, and it's really that full day just for yourself, but you still don't have to get on a flight.
Sure.
You don't have to go stay at a hotel, which is really difficult to do as a mom sometimes. Yeah. And then on top of that, we have our signature multi-day retreats, which can run from anywhere to 4 to 7 days.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, your friend who went to that retreat in Canada, just having a time for yourself to unplug from your daily obligations so your nervous system isn't getting repeatedly triggered by this is important and this is important and this is important. Sure. The retreat allows you to put a hand over your heart and say, no, this is important. I am important. And what is important to me? Really, that's like that bulk of the question is, what is my values? What is important to me? Where do I want my life to go? And not every retreat has to be, a huge revelation or a big epiphany. It's just that feeling of sinking down into your body again and feeling your body again. One of our students has experienced really crippling anxiety for a number of years, 5-6 years. And we were on our retreat in the Florida Keys last year. And she said at the end of the retreat, she's like, I can feel my legs for the first time. She said, I normally can't feel my legs. I'm so up in my head and I'm so blocked off from feeling my body that I feel my legs for the first time. That was 3 nights at a retreat. It wasn't like she went away for 2 weeks and did a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat. Sure. She didn't go off to India. Yeah. Like that was down in the Florida Keys for 3 nights. Yeah. And that was simply just being able to reconnect to yourself, reconnect to what's important to you, and really nourishing your body, not just through movement and breath, but also through food, through support, through community, through nature. Right. And so we see that a lot with students. They really find powerful transformations in themselves, not because of the techniques that we're teaching, which are simple and effective and very easy to integrate at home, but just by giving themselves the space to be, the space to ask the question, who am I? And the space to just come back down into their bodies, come back down and really feel what it's like to be here now, and then be able to take that back home.
It's a big deal. I think, a lot of times, even I'll give you an example, my phone is here, and because it's face up, and I don't know how many calls and texts and WhatsApp group messages have come through, it's distracted me about 4 times. I'm like, oh my God, people must need me. And then I'm like, actually, you're here. Could you just be here now? Could you release the day? And so I actually remember the days where we didn't have Wi-Fi when we went to Europe and abroad. And I think those were the best times.
Totally.
Because now when you go away, you don't have to go away. Sometimes I'll leave and I just won't tell anyone that I went on a trip. And so I'm still getting work and I won't even set an auto reminder, which we should do. But that power of unplugging, just to tie it back to Ayurveda for a moment, in Ayurveda we say if the body is constantly in fight or flight, we are never in rest and digest. We're not going to nourish and absorb our nutrients. We're not going to have the ability to create homeostasis in the body. And so I think so many of us who are in this space are here because we had our own health journeys. Sounds like you were, a competitive swimmer, really pushing on your body and then had to find new tools. So it's interesting how many people are probably walking around, in a sense, disconnected or anxious or struggling with mental health issues. So much came out of the pandemic and already existed before that as well. And I wonder if we all took a day and just immersed ourselves in tuning into self, how powerfully we would come out with that clarity that we need of, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm part of a group called Priestess Path. I've been in it since, I think, 2019, because I did year 1 and we were graduating in 2020 when I did my YTT yoga teacher training as well. And I remember the biggest gift I give myself is blocking a day a month called Priestess Day. And I go and I sit in that home and we have tea, but we do powerful spiritual work. And it's my one way to fully unplug. I hold the entire boundary for the day. I don't need my phone unless it's my kids, but my kids know to be fine for the
Mommy
day.
needs a day.
Yeah. But I just need time to tune back into what are my deepest values? What am I really trying to create here on planet Earth? What is my legacy in this time period? And how do I balance that desire for legacy against or with the commitment I've made into motherhood as wife and everything else too? How do we interplay it and have joy in both? So it's just interesting that you've created the kind of buffet of offerings, in a sense, this menu of offerings that allows for, new mom or woman who can just do the half day, the one day, like let's go a little farther, deeper, and do profound self-care is what that one sounds like. I saw you marketed one was at Spa Auberge.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've always wanted to go to an auberge hotel in this lifetime. This is one way I could go do it, and I could do it in community. And then I've also seen like Greece as a trip. So do you have any more stories like that? Because I love those stories and just your experience being a retreat creator and what that's been like.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure as you can tell from my story that travel has been a part of my life since I was very young. I've taken trips. I've lived in Europe. I've lived in Costa Rica. I've lived in Asia and Australia, and fully immersed myself in those cultures. And the closest that I've been to my truest, most authentic self is when I am traveling, when I'm immersing myself out of my comfort zone, when I'm learning a new language, trying new foods. There's something within your brain that craves novelty. It craves new experiences, and time actually slows down when you are experiencing new things because your brain's trying to absorb all these different new data points that it's not used to. So you can literally extend the perception of your life by trying new things and firing new neural pathways within your brain by just stepping outside of your comfort zone. And so for me, the most insightful, the most creative I've ever been, the most awesome business ideas I've ever had have been written in a scrawly handwritten journal on the top bunk of a train in Vietnam. Like those moments are so powerful for people. So I've always known that travel is the ultimate form of personal transformation if you allow it to be. It can be the all-inclusive in Jamaica. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's also something really powerful about really stepping outside of your comfort zone. And what's powerful about retreats is it allows people to travel to places that maybe they're a little nervous to go to by themselves. Maybe they're nervous to leave their hometown or their state or even the country. And going on a retreat allows them to get those really rich cultural experiences, really rich daily wellness, but also be able to explore and have fun and feel like they're safe within that group. So
sure, they're not coordinating it.
They're not
in
coordinating
charge of every detail.
Yes, they get to just show up and have all of the logistics planned for them, which is, for me, that's my favorite part of travel. I love planning all the logistics and choosing excursions and doing those really fun things, but that can be really overwhelming for some people. So for us, we like to think it's like travel with like elevated wellness. Like it's a way to expand your horizon without being totally overwhelmed by the planning or nervous about going somewhere new. So this is especially true we're going to Greece in a couple weeks. I actually leave next Friday for Greece. Wow. So I'm in the throes of packing. The whole family's coming. So we go to Greece. In September, we have a Costa Rica retreat where I used to live. And then also we're going to Thailand in January for a week, also in the same region that I used to live in as well. So it's really cool to bring people back to places that had profound shifts in my life.
Sure.
And with the students and the clients that we have, it's not just about the travel and the wellness and the transformation that can happen. It's also that sense of community. We have people who, one of our students in Costa Rica in 2020, I held a retreat there. Her main intention when she came back home, you always set an intention after the retreat to carry with you, was to make more friends in South Florida. It was a snowbird. She's been back and forth from the Northeast to Florida for many, many years, but really never felt totally connected in a way. And she said, this is going to be, like, my intention is really putting myself out there and making new friends. Okay. And she met a couple friends on the retreat who became her friends in South Florida. Nice. And now, fast forward 3 years, we just held a moving back to the Northeast party for her with 15 of our Rising Nature Retreats community having dinner together. And that's like her group. She made that happen for herself. Amazing. And that's the power of, like you said, what's my legacy in this world? It doesn't even need to be a global impact. You just get to ask yourself, what's the legacy I want to create for myself, for my family, for my community? And it's just those moments, those pockets of space that you can give to yourself on the retreat whilst learning really effective, really simple wellness techniques, whilst exploring and doing a surf lesson or a salsa lesson or having a historical tour through Greece. There's ways to infuse the fun and the adventure and the challenge with the wellness and the relaxation and the community support so that it feels like a really integrated travel experience.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I bet I'm supposed to wrap up soon. So it's interesting. You said in there, new experiences, building neural pathways, adventure, the safety net of traveling where you're not responsible for everything. To me, that's huge. My husband's like, oh, we should plan a summer trip. And I just looked at him like, when in my week would you like me to sit down and plan a trip? I have no interest. That sounds like fun. But if I have to look up airlines, logistics, hotels, details, excursions, I have to worry about my children and making sure I've packed for them. I'd rather not go, to be honest. Like, we went to India with them in 2020, actually, February, 5 seconds before the pandemic shut the world down.
Wow.
We had planned the trip in December 2019, and it was Feb 2020, and we heard of COVID, but everyone's like, oh, it's just like this virus. Don't worry about it. And we were like, okay. We went to India, and people were wearing masks on the way back, and all of a sudden the next week, the world changed. But I'm glad I took my kids because they couldn't fathom why there were pigs and cows walking down the road. What were all these smells and sights and things? Like, it was a different planet. And had I not been from India, it's a bit of a stretch for me to even fathom. My kids want to go to Thailand. It's a jump for me to think about planning a huge trip like that. And we don't want to always, not that we always travel that way, we don't want to travel in a way that's always super luxury, where it's like a Hyatt and a Marriott or a Fairmont, because that's not touching what the real culture is, know? Like, at least in India, if you stay at like a Taj, at least you're staying in a palace, and then you're experiencing some history in there. But there's just different ways of traveling. And I always grew up traveling one way. My husband definitely traveled a different way. And so he wants to always show the kids like reality and have them really experience the villages and the cultures.
It's hard to escape the reality when you're in India. Even if you're at a really, really 5-star resort, as soon as you get down on the street, you're smacked with it, which is such, I love that juxtaposition and the duality that lives in India if you allow yourself to be open to it. And I think that's the biggest thing with travel is whether it's a 5-star resort or you're staying at a hostel, it's if you're open, as soon as you walk out that door, you cross that threshold of wherever you're staying, whether it's 5-star or 1-star, as long as you're staying open to what that culture is, can teach you and what you can impact in some small way, whether it's shopping locally or working with a local guide instead of a massive conglomerate tour guide company, and just finding ways that you can make an impact with your, economical dollar while you're there, and just mindful travel. We try to talk about that a lot with our retreats, is how can you mindfully travel, respectfully travel, while also being able to reap the benefits yourself as well too.
Sure. And I love that. I mean, I can imagine so many different sectors of women who would benefit from going to this. Like, let's say you went through a divorce. Let's say you are just single in this moment. Let's say you had kids and need to escape life. Let's say you are just in the mood to make new friends and find new community than what you have. There's so many different reasons. Like, even my own mom, she's a widow. And I'm like, she should go on these trips with others. Otherwise, when are you going to travel? You wouldn't normally travel. I shouldn't say that, but many people would choose not to normally travel abroad alone, because they might find that daunting.
For sure.
And so this is a beautiful way to bring in and really fuse together wellness with delicious travel, with people who are guides along the way, who've been there, done that, understand how to make it the most beautiful experience.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Well, I wanted to wrap this up. I know that we could talk all day long. You and I have always met and talked about like sleep and sleep support and health and wellness and well-being. And I always love what you create. So I know that we'll always be working together and weaving together in different ways.
Yeah.
Is there any last thoughts that you want to share? Anything about what you do or anything we haven't covered? And then please make sure you share your websites and social.
Yeah, totally. So, I think we covered a lot of it. I do have my hand in a lot of different, offerings, I guess you can say, but the bulk of what I do on the Hello True Nature side is just helping women connect back to their bodies, reclaim their truth within themselves through yoga, meditation, breath work, and mindset. So I have a private coaching program for women, not just moms, but it's a online education platform with coaching. And then I also have the ebook that's available for anyone at any time on my website. Locally here in South Florida, I offer private yoga and meditation sessions. And then with the retreats, with Rising Nature Retreats, we've got, as I mentioned, we have those 3 international retreats coming up. We've got local events happening, and that's open for everyone. It's men and women. It's
awesome.
Everyone with no yoga experience at all the way to, doing handstands and meditating for an hour a day. So it's really open to everyone who's just ready to experience something new.
Perfect.
And so my websites are hellotruenature.com and Rising Nature Retreats, and the Instagram is at hellotruenature and at Rising Nature Retreats.
Perfect. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all that you're doing for the mom-baby world, for us to escape and really immerse ourselves in reconnecting back to self. That's why I wanted to have you on, because I find that if we are getting disconnected from self, then we don't get to have vibrant health. And it's such a powerful thing, whether that journey of motherhood is the experience in the here and now, and even post kids. Motherhood's such a long journey. And so that ability to talk to someone and release the guilt and stay centered and have community, and we're all going through it together, that alone is powerful. And then, of course, the idea of wellness retreats is one of my favorites. I just got invited to be a part of one later this year.
Oh, amazing.
And I'm so excited because the logistics part I didn't want to do, but the teaching part is my favorite. And so I'm really excited to get to do that.
Oh, there's going to be some lucky guests. That would be an awesome retreat.
Yeah, I can't wait to bring a lot of tea into it. I was like, I'm going to bring all my cases of tea and serve them tea
awesome.
And show them how to make teas that are healing and all those things,
Yeah.
So thank you for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas. Oh, that was one thing I forgot to ask you.
Oh, yeah?
Will you share with me your experience with Fusionary? Because I know you had taken, I think it was Deep Sleep Formula?
Yes.
Or Deep Sleep Tea?
Both, actually.
Okay.
So you had mentioned we have met up and talked about sleep, and that rung a bell in my head too. So I've done this Deep Sleep Tea as well as the tincture. I think that's and man, it just transformed my sleep. After my first daughter, Layla, I was really struggling with sleep, and the tea and the tinctures really helped. And then I was really, really struggling in the early parts of my pregnancy with my second. And so I had taken it a little bit during the first part just to help with that pregnancy insomnia, and then especially afterwards as well. So a lot of people don't understand that, yes, you're going to have a lack of sleep when you have the baby, but a lot of women struggle with pregnancy insomnia.
Sure.
And then even when your baby starts sleeping longer stretches, you're still kind of paranoid about, are they going to wake up? Are they not going to wake up? And you have this anxiety. So it's really hard to fall asleep. And the Deep Sleep Formula helps me fall asleep and then stay asleep, which is some of the hardest parts when you wake up at 2 a.m. and your brain starts going on its to-do list. So the Deep Sleep tea and the formula just absolutely transformed my sleep for me, which helps set me up for a vibrant day ahead.
Yeah. Kids, it's interesting with sleep. I even now rely on them. I have to have my Deep Sleep tea. Sometimes I'll wake up. Last night I woke up at 3 a.m. and I'll look, no, I need perfect sleep. So I'll take it for the last 3 hours of sleep that I need.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful tool.
Thank you for creating that. It's really, really powerful.
Of course. To me, if I can create anything to help people, that makes my whole world. That's the whole point of what I do. It's why I love creating supplements and teas all day. Like that's my favorite thing out of all the roles I get to have.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone again for joining me for this episode. You can check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for pain and inflammation. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more about me and my ebooks and resources and videos and tools, you can visit shivanigupta.com. And subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health Podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.